What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So this Sunday, we do have the Xbox Games Showcase happening, and on the lead up to it, we've seen some teasing as well as some big promises being made by Microsoft that could either be good news or one big setup. We'll go over that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about some new discoveries made in The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom that seems to be pointing towards some other releases to go along with the game. And we'll also be discussing Apple and their new VR, AR headset and the price. So if you guys enjoy this video, make sure to hit the like button, helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And we're going to start today with Apple and their entire presentation that seem to have some games there, as they're kind of pushing a bit of a focus on games for their new OS that's coming up. But they did have Hideo Kojima show up and talk about Death Stranding, as that will be something heading to Apple to obviously take advantage of the M2 chips and all of this, with Death Stranding releasing later this year. The other interesting thing is it seemed like Kojima was talking about other games heading there from, I guess, Kojima Productions, and hard to say exactly what would be moving over to Apple's platform, but of course they are working on several games right now, whether it's Death Stranding 2 or something with Microsoft that has to do with the cloud. The part about this, I'm very curious to see Death Stranding working on even some of the older chip, like the M1 chip. That could be kind of fun to see how that performs, and obviously some of the upscaling techniques that they are utilizing there, and then the Decima engine even. So a lot of stuff happening here with Apple and gaming, more than we've had previously. At least there's some sort of focus around playing things other than, I don't know, Solitaire or Candy Crush on your iPhone. Could be seeing Death Stranding here actually pretty soon. Also, as we head towards Ubisoft Forward, it looks like things are, of course, starting to leak out, as they tend to when we get closer and closer to different showcases. But you can see this posted up by Insider Gaming, who says the Crew Motorfest, hours of gameplay leaks ahead of Ubisoft event. Now, the event is happening on June 12th, and it's been rumored and talked about that a new Crew game would be there. And in fact, I believe Insider Gaming was the publication that did talk about this Crew Motorfest. And some of the footage that got out there, initially it was like 15 or 20 minutes, then it turned into about 2 hours of gameplay. And obviously I can't show you that here, so I'll just show you the Crew 2 trailer. But seemed to be taken on the PlayStation 5, and there's also a lot of unique identifiers in the video. So whoever decided to share this is probably going to be on Ubisoft's radar. But, I mean, from what was shown, it looked fine. It appears that it's going to have the day-night cycle. There'll be weather and obviously a bunch of different cars to drive around. I never really got into the Crew, the first one or the second one. I might give Motorfest a look if it looks somewhat interesting at Ubisoft Forward, but that's certainly one of the big titles to look forward to there, as well as the new Assassin's Creed Mirage. Oh, and last year we did have a new Robocop game that was announced, and people were kind of unsure as to how this thing would turn out with some of the bits of gameplay in the trailer that we saw. Well, we now have a better look at it, this from IGN, and a hands-on preview with it, and you can see some of it here. This game looks pretty good, better than I was expecting, I guess. Robocop Rogue City. I guess this would be kind of considered the quote-unquote AA style game, but it is from the studio behind Terminator Resistance that I've heard good things about. I have not tried Terminator Resistance, but it seems to so far encapsulate what you would expect it to feel like walking around as Robocop, where it's very robotic and it sounds very heavy, almost like a tank as you're walking around, but the action looks good. There's quests and different things to do in the city, and so far so good, especially with the visuals on Robocop. But yeah, we're looking towards this one in September. And I will say this is more on my radar now than before. So exciting stuff there, especially for Robocop fans who have wanted a good Robocop game. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with the Xbox Games Showcase that is happening this Sunday. And there seems to be a lot of excitement, anticipation building as we head towards that date. A lot of that does have to do with things like teases on Xbox's Twitter account, where a lot of people kind of connected the dots and are expecting Fable now to be at the show. But wouldn't it just be a CG trailer, right? Especially if the game's pretty far off. Well, that might not be the case, as we can see this posted up by Aaron Greenberg, who says none of our first-party games in the show are full CG trailers. Everything is either in-game footage, in-engine footage, or in-game footage with some cinematics. Each of our trailers will be labeled so it is hopefully clear for our fans, and this obviously is in response to what we saw at Sony's showcase, where it was a lot of new intellectual properties being announced like Fair Games with just CG and no in-game footage at all. So it was hard to really gather what exactly the game was outside of some vague descriptions of it kind of being like a heist game, similar maybe to a Payday setup there. Now, he does go on a bit further to what seems to be take a shot at Sony, where he says, can confirm there'll be no movie trailers in our game show, and then also doubling down saying there'll be no movie or TV show trailers in our game show. And to go a bit further here when it comes to the overall quality of the stream that we'll be viewing on Sunday, if you look at the news.xbox.com site, where they did release kind of a presser that goes over when and where you can watch this, they do mention it is 4K 60 frames per second on youtube.com/Xbox and youtube.com/Bethesda. Typically in the past, we've seen it 1080p 60 or 1080p 30, and I believe on Mixer they did stream at some very high quality at 4K, but I feel like this is the first time we've really seen them push a 4K 60 FPS stream. A lot of times with these streams, it'll just be 1080 30 or something, and then afterwards you have to go around and hunt down the uploaded 4K 60 FPS trailer that gets pushed out after the stream is done. So this really sounds like it's lining up to be a big time show for them, more so than what we've seen from them in the past. We won't have that 12-month window, most likely. They don't even try to play around with that idea. But if they really can show up with mostly in-engine or in-game footage of these different titles, and one that people are expecting now is something related to Fable, and I mean, that would be pretty big there. Obviously, Forza, we expect that to be in-game because we're kind of expecting a release date for it that would most likely be October or November. Starfield, we've already seen in-game footage for it, but them just kind of doubling down and showing it off more in that presentation following this Xbox showcase, it seems like they will be having at least a lot of different games there. And if most of the first-party stuff is all in-game with some cinematics kind of intertwined, seems like they could have a showcase that should at least be a better games showcase than what we saw from Sony first-party wise. Now, you do also have to realize that he is specifically saying first-party games. I'm sure there will be third-party games that will be presented with just CG, but I mean, they can't really control that. They, of course, want to show off a bunch of partner games as well, and if they turn in a CG trailer, well, that's just kind of the way it is. But what they can control, being the first-party stuff, I would expect, as these mentioned here, just in-game footage. And that is very interesting for some games we haven't seen in a while, with the top of the list being Fable right now. So, exciting stuff. Hard not to have high expectations for this presentation on Sunday, so we'll see what Xbox has for us then. Next up, let's talk about Geoff Keighly and some of his comments around Summer Game Fest and E3. Of course, we have Summer Game Fest happening on Thursday, and looking forward to that as well alongside of the Xbox Game Showcase. That being more of a grab bag of announcements, whereas we go to Xbox Showcase, we know it's going to be a lot of Xbox titles there. So who knows what we'll see this Thursday. However, in a recent interview with the VGC podcast, Geoff Keighly did talk about kind of the downfall of E3 a bit. This posted up over on VGC where they transcribed it. This from Geoff Keighly saying, I think E3 sort of killed itself in a way. I understand why people say Summer Game Fest killed E3, but I think if anything, we created Summer Game Fest, and I built Summer Game Fest because I saw the wheels falling off the wagon of E3. And yeah, it kind of makes sense because he left E3 while it was still going on to make Summer Game Fest. So it was almost going to run alongside of it. Says, as someone who loves that time of year for 2 decades, E3 was part of my life since I was a 15-year-old kid. From the first E3 in 1995, I went to every show. I loved it, and it defined my summer. It was so exciting to me, and it was heartbreaking to see that start to fall apart. I think they had a relevancy problem, and then they also had a participation problem over the final year. So yeah, I think the question is, if we didn't do Summer Game Fest, what would happen? I think things would have just kind of really splintered apart this summer. And in this case, I do agree with Geoff in the sense that it's pretty obvious publishers and platform holders started to realize that they can just stream stuff themselves, and they didn't necessarily need E3, whereas in the 90s and really the start of the 2000s there, it was kind of like, let's all get together, and E3, the ESA, they'll handle the distribution of information. But now if Capcom wants to announce something, they go live and everyone tunes in. Whenever Take-Two is ready to announce GTA 6, they'll hit go live on a computer and we'll all watch it. It'll be millions of us most likely. So it's not necessary for E3. Even now, announcing a console, we saw how Nintendo did it. We've seen how Sony and Microsoft have done it. They'll typically have their own run-up of marketing. They'll pick a venue somewhere and they'll just announce it and showcase it over time, because that's where we are now with the internet. It's much easier to get information out there without paying millions and millions of dollars to rent booth space, a stage, and all this at E3. So as mentioned by Geoff, it's hard for E3 itself to be relevant when it started as a trade show, which I think it still makes sense now, but then they really started to morph it into something that was more for the consumer, as opposed to publishers, developers kind of getting together and discussing things in meeting rooms behind closed doors, face to face, and obviously different vendors and companies that would produce accessories and those sorts of things. So it became less about talking business and more about entertaining. Also, I do want to point this out because as Geoff is kind of making the rounds right now in the build up to Summer Game Fest, and he kind of discussed Summer Game Fest, some of the back end details here. For example, what's the toughest company to work with right now to get at Summer Games Fest? Nintendo being brought up there as the only company that hasn't been an official sponsor for Summer Games Fest. However, one question was, have you ever passed on a reveal because it didn't feel real and you felt it's deceptive? Interesting enough, Geoff does bring up Abandoned. Remember that whole debacle by Blue Box? Everyone thought it was Kojima was involved in it. Said he kept getting pitched that by the developers to do something on it and just never felt like it was a real game. So at this point, since everyone's kind of forgotten about it and it's pretty obvious that it was never necessarily going to be a big release or game that was coming out, what was that supposed to be? The end of last year was going to come out? Probably dodged a bullet on that one. But I'm pretty much in agreement with Geoff and what he's mentioned here with E3 and how it pretty much was something that they had done to themselves to a degree, failing to adapt over time with how technology and everything has sort of changed. And, I was thinking about it as we're going into what next week would have typically been the E3 week. I do kind of miss it. There's a lot of excitement as we would head into the big time event with all these showcases going on. It's a bit more spread out and it's at least still a thing, but I don't know, something about the feeling of E3 week not really being here now. I'd like E3 to come back, but there'd be too much work, I think, for it to happen. So at this point, I don't think it's ever really coming back. So, hey, we'll see if Summer Game Fest can continue to evolve as we go through the years and maybe become the E3 replacement. We'll see. Next up, let's talk about some interesting discoveries that have been made in The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. I don't think this is necessarily spoiler territory, but just in case, I do have the timestamps down below so you can kind of jump ahead to the next section there. But within The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, people are data mining it and they're finding different items that are unable to be unlocked through official means. Of course, they can play around with the code and essentially unlock it that way. But if you want to unlock these different things, it seems like you may need certain items that have not been announced yet. Let's take a look here. This posted over on Eurogamer, who says, newest of these discoveries are 2 unused paraglider fabrics found by data miners. Now, with these different fabrics, you can kind of change the look of your paraglider in the game. And these 2 fabrics are called Princess Zelda and Gerudo King, have been showcased. So there is an entire video on YouTube from Loot Ward. And yeah, you can kind of look at these and go, oh, there must be some amiibo on the way. And yeah, considering the 2 unused fabrics are linked to amiibo IDs 1049 and 1050. The Tears of the Kingdom version of Link is apparently linked to an ID of 1048. Now, it's not too surprising to think that, okay, we would probably see amiibo released after the fact here, because I still think we'll probably have amiibo and we'll probably have downloadable content at some point, which is mind-blowing to consider since Tears of the Kingdom is already massive in scale with the amount of stuff to do. I recently said I've finished up Tears of the Kingdom. Mostly, I've beaten the game, done like 94, 95 shrines or something, and I'm ready to move on now. but I will certainly be coming back to it when I get some more time. It's just there's other stuff happening right now with Street Fighter, Diablo 4, and eventually Final Fantasy 16. But I'm still looking at that like, wow, I feel like I've scratched the surface at roughly 65 to 70 hours. Then you potentially tack on downloadable content maybe a year after its release. Who knows? Maybe for the holiday season coming up, and it becomes even more overwhelming than the amount of content that's already there. But certainly Amiibo, Nintendo doesn't really want to pass up the opportunity just to sell more accessories. So if you're an Amiibo collector, I would just keep my eyes open, especially for announcements on Twitter, as I think that's how Nintendo's going to be handling the summer. It's just a lot of Twitter announcements for accessories and even some games, work towards the Pikmin 4 release, and then maybe sometime in September have a direct, a larger general direct kind of setting up the holiday, and then maybe the first half of 2024. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Apple and their new headset. Now, this is labeled the Vision Pro, and it's basically a mixed reality headset as it uses virtual reality and augmented reality. There's an entire trailer that was released for this, kind of going over all of the different features, and it took up 40 minutes of their 2-hour or so presentation at WWDC. And I will say this up front, the technology is very, very interesting. Like, if I could just have one of these headsets, I think it'd be a fun thing to try out and see exactly what it can offer. Inside the headset, there are displays for each eye at 4K using micro OLED technology. There are 12 cameras, 5 sensors, 6 microphones, all being driven by Apple's M2 chip. That works in tandem with the new R1 chip, this being designed for real-time processing of the world around you. There's also a little dial at the top that when you turn it, lets you feature more or less of the virtual world versus the real-world view. Of course, some of those cameras are outside of the headset. In fact, 2 of them look down to where your hands would be so it can track any of the motions or movements that you do to interact with what you're seeing on screen. You can use a controller if you want to play different games, as they talked about over 100 different titles from, I guess, Apple Arcade would be compatible, and they showed off NBA 2K with a PlayStation 5 DualSense controller actually there. But the idea of being able to merge kind of your virtual world and the real world was a big focus here, as they were trying to at least keep more of the social aspects intact for essentially people around you. So you have kind of the glass that you can see through using the inside out cameras and all these different things. But when you're not looking through or seeing the outside world, people outside of your headset will kind of just see a screen that's projecting different images or designs and stuff. But if they get close enough to you, they'll all of a sudden appear in your virtual world. So those sorts of things are interesting, and the idea of being able to just use your hands and your eyes to kind of motion around and complete different tasks in the virtual world, sure, that could be fun. But obviously, we know that the PSVR 2 will use eye tracking in order to navigate around. This is more or less them taking the idea of what we've seen with VR and AR and smashing it all together in their Apple ecosystem. There was a mention of battery life being about 2 hours, or as they said, all-day use when it's plugged in, which, I mean, yeah, I would hope so. Like, I don't think the thing is going to shut down on me if I don't want it to, I hope. But then they got to the price, which this is, I've mentioned sticker shock before. I mean, this was like sticker electrocution. It was wild when they threw up the $3,499 price point. Now, it's releasing in 2024, and people have wondered, who is this for exactly? The enthusiasts, the people who are really into the Apple ecosystem and don't mind buying wheels for $500. That's about all I can think of. This is not really for the mass market, even though they tried to show it off with families recording birthdays and moments that they can look back on. Maybe sometime in the future when these are like Quest 3 pricing at $500 or something, not where it stands now at $3,500. But this is the first iteration of what I assume to be a long line of these headsets. So maybe 4 or 5, even 6 years from now, they'll have like the third iteration out, and you can pay like $2,500 for one of these headsets. But at least technology-wise, it is compelling stuff. So there you have it. If you've really been interested in Apple's headset, you might want to start saving up now. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're taking a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I asked, are you picking up Diablo 4? 59% say, no, I'm not interested. Look, though, 9% say I already picked up the early access version. 25% say yes later on when there's a sale, and then 7% say yes, picking it up ASAP. I will be starting my Diablo 4 journey today. I had considered the early access thing, but I realized Street Fighter 6 was kind of filling my time, so I would just play the single player portion of that up until Diablo 4 release. So I'm excited to go through this game. I know it's a massive time sink, but it's Diablo. Diablo 3 was fun. I know it had launch issues and stuff, but hey, that's what the early access period is for. Let people pay an extra $20 or $30 to iron all those issues out. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as we're seeing here. This is from Paul, who says, given the state some games have been released in recently, maybe people are a little more cautious about pre-orders until reviews start dropping. And yeah, I figure that's the case. Games being $70 now, while it's a $10 difference, it's still a difference that people notice and recognize and go, well, hold on, we've seen these games launch broken many times. Let's see what we have here with reviews. And I will say with Final Fantasy 16, at least on paper from what they've described, it's shaping up to be a good release. The fact that no day one patch is necessary and it's all going to be on the disc, I think is a good sign. So we'll see the demo most likely released this week, we'll have the reviews drop, and most likely the lacking pre-order numbers reportedly that Square Enix is seeing will probably be a thing of the past, especially when we get to release day. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here. Today was Xbox Showcase, apparently having all first-party games in-game or in-engine. What game would you like to see gameplay of there? And then also, what about Apple's new headset, the Vision Pro? What did you think when you saw the features and then the $3,500 price tag, and The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom? Are you expecting new DLC and new amiibo? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.